A pleasant welcome to our webinar presentation. My name is Eric Radke, and I will be serving as your host and moderator for today's topic, and that is getting you through the often dreaded instrument written exam. Now, the good news is that in this modern era, we have some phenomenal tools and some proven techniques to get you through not only passing the written test, but also with a great score. And a great score matters because that doesn't go unnoticed when it comes to check ride time. Before I introduce our presenter for today, I do wish to take a quick moment to thank our sponsor, Sporty's, Sportys.com. Thank you for thinking of Sporty's for all of your training material and pilot supplies. And thank you to Sporty's for making this free webinar possible. A couple of quick housekeeping notes. We are recording today's presentation as always, so if you have to step away, not a problem. Just come back and visit Sporty's YouTube channel anytime, and you can see our full lineup of recorded presentations, including this one. And if you would like to pose any questions during the presentation, we do welcome you to do that. And you can do that via the webinar software, and we'll carve out some time at the end to address those questions. Now it's my pleasure to welcome our presenter, Mr. Brett Covey. Brett is not only a veteran flight instructor with extensive teaching experience, including preparing people for the instrument written exam, but he's also senior VP at Sporty's and responsible for all the development of all the great online training content that Sporty's offers. So we're certainly in good hands. And like I said, he's helped thousands of students achieve great success when it comes to instrument written. Brett is on with us. Brett, welcome. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks, Eric, and thanks for the great introduction.
Brett, let's start with a question. You authored a very popular article on flighttrainingcentral.com about a year or so ago, and it was on the topic of written exams, and you talked about how written exams have evolved. So let's start with some good news. What do you view as some positive ways in which the written test and process has changed over the years that you've been preparing students?
Sure, and I'll even take it a step further. Before my time, and I learned to fly around the year 2000. So about the time the internet was just coming into being and being used for various things, various training tools, entertainment, retail, etc., and also provides great educational products and things that we're going to talk about here today. But even prior to that, people studied and students studied for the knowledge test, often cramming in a weekend ground school. That was popular 60s, 70s, 80s, even through the 90s, where there weren't a lot of electronic resources. But the best way for students to learn about that was to immerse themselves in a hotel, often conference room, hosted by a flight instructor or a team of flight instructors that would just focus on the written test just for those 3 days. And the whole goal was to memorize a lot of topics, get familiar with it, leave on that Sunday night, go take the knowledge test the next day, and that was the focus. And while it was effective, not probably the most enjoyable experience, not the best way that a lot of people want to spend their weekends. That evolved into eventually books that publishers produced. Sporties did, Gleim, ASA, which would contain a database of all the test prep questions. Turned into more of a self-study focus where students could go in and review the questions, review the answers, mark them up, highlight, pencil, paper, etc. Effective again, but just kind of with that single focus of test prep in mind to check off that milestone in preparation for the check ride and during the training. Today, it's part of an integrated training experience, which we're going to talk about today. Still self-study, done online often or in mobile applications, but part of a much more comprehensive training program integrated with the ground training, the flight training, as well as the electronic tools to study test prep questions and just make it an overall better experience and a more learning experience rather than just rote memorization. So the students today are going to have access to these tools and make it, again, a much more valuable experience.
Well, thanks for that, Brett. The old way sounds awful, so thank goodness we've made great strides. So with that, I'm going to let you dive right in.
Yeah, thanks. And can you verify you see that 182 on the screen there with the introduction slide?
Confirmed.
Good. So that's my favorite airplane these days. It's a 182, 2001 model, and it's my favorite IFR airplane. And so I want to stress here, we're going to focus on the written test, which is one task, but our goal here is to become instrument pilots, to fly above the clouds, get above the fog, the low visibility, allow us to make more trips on the recreational and personal side. Also, obviously, a necessary step for those career-driven pilots to get an instrument rating to move on to commercial pilot and ATP. So I like to show this picture here though, because it's what you can do as an instrument rated pilot. And we often lose sight of that in training as we fly multiple approaches on any given lesson, focus on staring at instruments, having your flight instructor cover instruments, really doing all those training tasks, building those fundamental skills. But don't forget about that light at the end of the tunnel while you're doing this. And that is really to get more value, more enjoyment out of your flying, get more utility, be able to fly on those days when you typically couldn't in the past because of a low ceiling or low visibility. So just kind of keep that in mind as we kind of transition here into that training phase. Again, my name is Brett Kobe. That's a picture there of Sporty's. We're at the Claremont County Airport, just east of Cincinnati, Ohio. A lot of things go on here at Sporty's. Many know us as the catalog company that sends out lots of cool paper catalogs with lots of fun products. Obviously, a thriving airport community as well, which I want to reinforce here with a Part 61 and Part 141 flight school. That would be Sporty's Academy. We have 24 training airplanes, lots of hangar attendants. So just a bustling GA aircraft airport with a lot of aircraft and a lot of activities. This is where I learned to fly in 2000. Became a flight instructor in 2002, and have been doing that ever since, along with my primary role here at Sporty's, developing online training products and courses, software. And that goes for all of our courses, Learn to Fly, student pilot training through private pilot. Of course, today we're going to focus on instrument flying all the way through commercial and multi-engine. That picture there in the center bottom is that same 182. We like to go out and fly. I like to fly instruments just for the fun of it. When the weather gets low, gets foggy, or low clouds, I like to take it up and go practice instrument approaches. And that's the really reward that you can see there at the end of the flight is breaking out of the clouds, out of the low visibility, seeing the approach, lighting, and landing. And with all the technology we have today, which we're not going to focus on too much, but the technology in the airplane, be it the iPad, ForeFlight, the latest Garmin avionics, flight instruments, it really makes instrument flying just completely different than it was when I learned back in 2002, where we were focusing on VOR needles and NDB needles. You were lucky if you had a basic moving map, but today the situational awareness is just so much greater. It makes for a much safer and more enjoyable experience when flying instruments. But today we're going to talk about the written test, one of those necessary tasks that we have to accomplish to get through the training and onto the check ride to get your instrument rating. This is a short outline of the topics we'll cover about the FAA written test, kind of the nuts and bolts of what it is. When should you take the test? There's a lot of varying opinions there about when you should do it during your training, and schools will approach this differently based on whether you're doing an accelerated training course at a career-focused school versus someone maybe flying a couple days a week while still working full-time and doing this more for their pilot advancement to build some skills. Really depends and can influence when you should take the test. And most importantly, how to effectively use a test prep course. Whether you're going for an accountant license or bar exam or whatever kind of certification you're going for, in this case, aviation, it's important to use a test preparation course to focus on the key topics for the test. There's a finite amount of questions that FAA uses on this, and you want to be prepared and know what to expect when you get there on the test day. So that's a non-event, and you walk out of there with your 90% or greater score and feel very satisfied with how you prepared for it. So let's talk about the path to the instrument rating. Very similar for those that already have a private certificate. A couple of different components. There's the ground school training aspect, so learning the material often comes in the form of reading FAA handbooks, ground school materials online like Sporty's instrument rating course, watching videos online, and might even come down to you working with your instructor one-on-one at the flight school. Lots of different options there for how to accomplish that ground training. Of course, the flight training aspect, that's where you're going to get up in different phases, learn how to fly the airplane just by the instruments with a view limiting device, often called a hood, or foggles, which is going to focus on just flying based on those six main instruments there, or an electronic flight display like a G1000. But you're not going to enjoy that nice view out the front, seeing yourself above the clouds. You're going to be staring at the instruments and working the avionics, working on air traffic control communications, hopefully some weather scenarios thrown in by your instructor. But that's where you learn those core fundamental skills, the physical motor skills of flying the airplane and processing what you see in the instruments. Now, along the way, our core focus today, taking the FAA Knowledge Test. You need to get a 70% score on that, just like your private pilot, to hit the bare minimum there. And then all culminates with the FAA check ride, similar again to the private pilot check ride, which you have the oral exam and a flight test. The instrument knowledge test looks a lot like the private. So there's 60 questions, each multiple choice with 3 answers to choose from. Of course, the goal is always to choose the best answer. Several answers may look similar or correct, but it is to choose the best answer. You are allotted 2 hours and 30 minutes to take the test, which is more than enough time, and requires a minimum score of 70%. And again, just like the private, it's pass fail. So 70% or higher, you are moving on. Less than 70%, you will need to study again and retake the test. But the good news here on the statistics, the average pass rate across the country is 94%. These numbers just came out for the year 2024, so pretty recent. Average score among pilots is 86% across the country. But I'll point out here a stat I put there, and I mentioned here that we have the Sporty's Academy Flight School, have hundreds of students that graduate here every year, various phases, private, instrument, commercial. But our pass rate on the knowledge test, and all the students use our Sporty's online ground schools through the pilot training system. All the students combined, our average pass rate on knowledge tests is 99.4%. So it goes to show when you use a trusted system, a thorough system, you're all but guaranteed to pass a knowledge test without even sweat in the process. So again, there's a lot of anxiety related to the instrument test. It is, I will say, it's one of the more challenging ones, and because of that, people put more practice and more preparation into it. But it shows, though, again, with those high pass rates on the industry level across the board, and then again, even our higher level for students that run through and use the Sporty's instrument rating course. In the test preparation materials, you'll find a percentage of questions. This isn't really going to guide too much of how you prepare, but I just wanted to bring up and make you aware of the key topics. And as you can see here, these are mostly academic topics. You're not going to be testing a whole lot on what I consider the stuff that actually matters when you're flying instruments, but it's going to be chart reading. There's a little bit of decision making, CRM, safe and efficient IFR operations, but at the end of the day, it's a lot of working with charts and understanding regulations and procedural things. The actual practical aspect of it really comes to the flight training and the actual airplane itself. So like the private pilot knowledge test, a lot of this is very academic and not as applicable or practical to how you're actually flying the airplane and the instrument system. But that's just the reality of knowledge tests these days. So we have to work with what we're given us. Like the private pilot knowledge test, you can bring your E6B, either mechanical if you like that method, or most like to choose an electronic E6B. Only a couple options here, really. Sporty's E6B here, or the ASA, I think it's the CX3. These are flight computers designed to be used on the knowledge test. And the key point is that if you pull the batteries out, all the memory is reset. That's really what the FAA or the test proctor is looking for. So don't bring in your Texas Instruments, TI, whatever, or some other kind of mobile app or Android. The proctor won't allow you to have that. So stick with your Sporty Z6B. And you can bring along a sectional plotter. What I like this for is the straight edge feature. There's often times where you need to put it on a chart to measure not a distance, but just kind of get a feel for a course or a path, maybe help draw a holding pattern. Not using it like the traditional days of uh, measuring courses on a sectional, but I do find it a valuable tool. So bring that along with you into the testing center. Like the private pilot test, you'll be provided with an airman knowledge testing supplement. This one is specific for the instrument rating. Majority of the book is filled with instrument approach charts. That's what a lot of the questions will reference, a lot of en route charts as well. Instruments, a couple navigation scenarios, but very, very thick book. And FAA continues to add new questions based on the charts in this book. So I would recommend, even if you don't study it front to cover, you can download a copy of this from your instrument rating course from Sporty's, or just Google it and find a download. But at least flip through it and just become familiar with the types of figures that you might see on the actual test. Okay, so when should you plan on taking the test? So let's say you walked in tomorrow to your flight school and you have your private certificate and you're beginning your instrument training. On the accelerated side, so the career flight schools, many of those where you're flying 5 days a week, often a couple times a day, they may require you to take the test ahead of time before you even walk in the door because they want to just focus on flying with you. A lot of it, that's probably, I'd say, not the standard in the industry. A lot of us are training on a more relaxed schedule, maybe 2, 3, 4 times a week, where you are obviously doing other things beyond just the flight training. You're not fully immersed. And for that reason, I'd say get through a lot of your training with your flight instructor first before you focus on the knowledge test. And so typically 3 phases of instrument training, and I'll kind of base this on the Sporty's syllabi, what we use here at our school. First phase is focusing on basic instrument flying skills, learning how to interpret the instruments, fly the airplane with a view limiting device, a lot of times often in a flight training device or a flight simulator. Second phase, focusing on instrument approaches, navigation, learning those core skills of concluding an instrument flight. Then there'll be some cross-country phases as well to build up that cross-country time. And that's why we're flying IFR, is to go places to make better use of our airplane. So cross-country flying is very important. I would generally recommend starting the preparation process maybe in the instrument approach phase of your training, and then really get through some of your cross country flying as you learn some of those skills beyond just what you're studying on the practice test and the test preparation questions. Get that real world experience flying the airplane in the scenarios, and then really start working on the knowledge test and preparing for it. Not saying you can't study ahead of time, because again, you can study, as you'll see here in our demo. You can focus on the knowledge questions that are applicable to your phase of training, but don't rush to knock it all out in the first couple weeks or the first third of your training. Wait until you get into some of those more in-depth flight training and complex topics, and it'll make you understand the questions better. And a lot of times you'll find you'll be able to answer them without even having to, research the explanation. It'll just make more sense to you later on in your training. And remember too, the test results, after you pass your test, you'll be given that official test report. Those are good for 24 calendar months, and you need to be a minimum of 15 years old of age to take the test. So a couple of this kind of basic stats there to help you consider that optimum time. I mentioned earlier in the intro that the old way of studying, the old way, was cramming in a ground school over 2 or 3 days with an instructor. 20 years ago, what I had to do, and I had to do this for basically private through ATP, written test, all private instrument, commercial ATP. I had a book with all the questions, and I would go through and highlight the right answer and make notes and basically memorize answers. And even back at that time, it was a little bit different. That the FAA used to publish every single question and answer that was on the test in a public database. Well, 10, 15 years ago, I'd say they stopped doing that. So there is no public record of all the questions that are on the test. Ground school providers like Sporty's have information that have allowed us to have parallel questions to help you train for what you're expected to see on the test. They might not be worded identically to what you see there, but they're going to cover all the same core topics. But just remember, though, that nobody actually, and I say nobody as in online ground schools or providers, have all the questions exactly that you're going to see on the test. So it does take some studying and takes a program to prepare you beyond just looking at questions and answers, but really understanding the material to make sure you're fully prepared for the test. So again, in that old way, you'd have a lot of rote memorization, highlight the best answer. And I remember in the early 2000s, it was so bad that you could memorize a number, for example, for a takeoff distance in a book, and you would see that exact same number as the answer on the test. So students were just literally memorizing answers, not even looking at the question, and could go through and ace the test. Well, obviously, FAA picked up on that and changed the way they approach releasing data and generating the tests that you actually take, which is for the better. That provided no value to the user or the instructor, the student taking the test as well. So again, Eric kind of mentioned early on, are we in a better place? Yes, but it brings new challenges as well and how you prepare for it. So what's the modern way? Choosing an interactive self-study video course like Sporty's instrument rating course that will teach you both the ground school and flight preparation for each lesson. And integrated with that is a fully functioning and engaging test prep resource that allows you to study questions, allows you to focus on weak areas, has analytics to gauge your progress, allows you to take practice tests to see what you're going to actually simulate getting on the actual test based on a 60-question sample test. And again, I stress there at the bottom, it's very important to remember the FAA no longer publishes all the questions. So you really need to take this comprehensive approach to training and preparing for the test to make sure you're fully prepared. So key point, it's not a rote memorization exercise. It's important that you learn these concepts in video training and reading handbooks and working with interactive exercises. And it's going to prepare you not only for the test, but it's going to make you just a better overall pilot, a better prepared instrument pilot. Instrument flying is all about safety. It's about preparation, and the same philosophy should apply as you prepare for the knowledge test. And our goal is to be able to complete these flights and often challenging weather conditions and feel comfortable doing so. So today we're going to focus on, again, Sporty's instrument rating course. I'm going to jump into a demo here shortly to walk through my recommendations on how to best use the course to prepare for your knowledge test. But again, that's just one component. It's, again, focused on 12 hours of HD and 4K video training, teaching you how to be a very good and safe instrument pilot, showing you what you're going to see at the end of an approach, what the approach lighting means, what the different runway markings mean, how to make use of the latest technology, autopilots, Garmin avionics, etc. And that's why that video flight maneuvers guide that's a part of the course is so important, because it really just goes much, much further beyond just ground school training and test prep, and culminates with a check ride prep tool that allows you to, again, prepare for that final phase with the examiner, the oral exam, and the flight test. And I don't have info on it here, but we just added some really exciting, we call them aviation intelligence or AI tools in the course. One of those we call Chat DPE, which is a check ride prep tool. The system will actually ask you questions representative of what a flight examiner would ask on the oral exam. You would type out your answers and you'll get real-time feedback, talking with a simulated examiner based on whether your answer is right or wrong, give you feedback on how to better answer the question. So really nice tool here as we evolve with our technology and take advantage of the latest AI features in our system. So how's a personal study course benefit you as the student? Again, we mentioned it brings those challenging concepts to life, allows you to see and experience the sights and sounds in instrument flying that you may not see in actual training. Depending on where you're flying, you might not have the experience to actually get into a cloud during your instrument training. Say you're in Arizona or Florida and the weather conditions are always VFR, but you still have to see and understand what to expect in those weather environments, even if you never actually experience them during your training. Number two is really most important for me these days with the expense of flight training and how much an hour with an instructor costs in a 172, and that is saving time and money. The more you can prepare ahead of time for each flight lesson, for each ground lesson, for this test, the more you're going to be proceeding with your training in efficiency. And an instrument rating can easily cost $15,000-$20,000 based on how long it goes out. So the better you are prepared, the less time in the airplane, and ultimately saves you money in that process. And a big part of that is being prepared for each lesson, and of course the self-study for the knowledge test that we're going to focus on today. From your instructor standpoint, and I think it's important you bring this up if when you are using our courseware, is you can share your progress with your instructor, and they can access that through our separate flight instructor portal. That allows them to see how you're doing on your knowledge test preparation, how you're progressing in ground school. They can actually see your practice test and study sessions in their CFI portal, so they can kind of keep an eye on that and focus on some of your weaker areas if it's not obvious to you, and develop ground lesson training or specific training to focus on those weaker areas. So when using this courseware, make sure you use that share progress feature and send that over to your flight instructor. I'll also mention a recent feature if your flight school uses Flight Schedule Pro and they turn on the Sporty's integration, your instructor and your flight school management and you will be able to see your Sporty's instrument rating progress right in Flight Schedule Pro. That'll show up in the My Training section. Kind of nice for various reasons. Your flight school can track your progress there, similar to the CFI portal I just showed. But also you can use this to jump back to your course. So if you're in Flight Schedule Pro looking at your next flight lesson, your next ground lesson, it's also going to have an outline of all of the lessons in your instrument rating course, and you can use those links to jump right there. So again, check with your flight school if they do use Flight Schedule Pro. Ask them about the Sporty's integration and have them turn that on to really make a more powerful experience. Now, as far as the course itself, very important. It's lifetime access. So when you buy this course, you get it forever. There's no subscriptions. There's no upcharges for feature updates. You buy it once, you keep it forever. And more importantly, you get access to all of our platforms, industry leading in terms of what's out there. Of course, the online experience, which we're going to demo today, dedicated iPhone, iPad apps called the Pilot Training app. You can search for Sporties or Pilot Training. Dedicated Android app, 5 smart TV apps, so you can watch all the video on your big screen at home on Apple TV, Roku, Android, Fire TV, all the smart TV apps you'll find. Just search for Sporties to get that content. And again, that flight instructor progress sharing, which is key to bring them into the loop. While this is self-study, you want them to see what you're doing as well, so they know how to accommodate and also coordinate the flight lessons. All right, so with that, I'm going to jump over and we're going to take a look at the actual instrument rating course itself. So in this demo, I've already logged in. And if you want to check this out, write down this address, sporties.com/demo. We'll have that link up later in the presentation, but sporties.com/demo. If you're not already in the courseware, you can go there, check it out, watch a couple of videos, do some test prep demos to learn more about it. But for this scenario, we're already logged in with a user, and we're not going to focus too much outside of test prep, but I want to stress that the way to start here is with the actual video training for the course. And that's where we're at here on the left-hand side in video training. And it's laid out by chapter. There's 6 chapters here, starting with instrument flying fundamentals, progressing through navigation, approaches, weather, advanced IFR, and IFR flying techniques. And if it's not obvious enough based on the chapter names and the visuals, this is a flying course. This is a real world course on how to fly instruments. And because of that, you're really going to learn as well the key parts of the knowledge test throughout the training. So the way to progress through this is basically lesson by lesson, go in a linear order. It's about 12 to 13 hours. Go through each lesson. You'll achieve progress along the way. And let's go ahead and pull a lesson up here. We'll do straight and level climbs and descents. And go ahead and watch the video lesson. I'm not going to play it here now because we're going to stay focused on test prep. But typical way to go through this, watch the video lesson. You've got section notes here, very well organized to identify the key points in the video for further review. There's a review quiz. Definitely take that at the end of each video lesson to help reinforce the key material. Use the play explanation button. You'll see that at the bottom right. So what that will do after you answer a question incorrect or correctly, it'll take you right to the point in the video to learn more about that topic. So you may not do that every time, but it's a good way to learn more about the questions you answered incorrectly, jump back to the video to the respective point and watch that training again. Got a full transcript for those that want to read even more. And then references back to the FAA handbooks. So in this case, the Instrument Flying Handbook is one of the primary FAA training resources for preparing for that rating. If you click view here, it's going to load up a new view with that PDF right there. So a combination of video training, reading FAA handbooks as appropriate. I generally don't recommend students just grab a handbook or the FARs or the AIM and read it. But you're going to find throughout our courseware that we link from various points to the respective lesson or chapter in a handbook or a regulation that allows you to focus just on what's relevant to that lesson that day. So use those resources, use those links to jump around and do additional study. Last thing I'll point out here before I get to the test prep demo, we also have built a lot of interactive scenarios recently. Now these are connected to the lessons through the video training. So throughout the ground school training and videos, you'll be able to click on one of these to learn more. But things like simulators, so localizer approach simulator to learn how the localizer navigation system works. You can move the airplane around and see how the needle reacts. Learn about approach lighting. What are the different approach lighting systems and what can they tell you? And what's it mean when you have a half-mile visibility and you only see certain parts of the lighting system? What can you do? And of course, a big focus on approach charts and holding pattern simulators and holding pattern entries. A lot of great resources here to put into practice what you learn in the training. And what you'll find here too by going through these, a lot of the core concepts are reinforced and tested in the actual test prep section. So overall gist, get through all the video training first, use the interactive exercises, read the related study materials with each lesson. And at that point, it's time to start thinking about the knowledge test preparation. So what's going to load up here, and I've got a user that has some progress already just so I can show some of the features. But you have two study modes eventually, or two ways to get started. And that's with a study session, as you can see in this first button, or a FAA practice test. The place to start, always start, is study sessions. Don't even be tempted to take a practice test. Don't even look at that or push that button until you've gone through every single question at least once in a study session. It's a waste of your time, I'll tell you that straight up. So your goal here is to just focus on study sessions. So we'll go through an example here. And we've built a lot of customization and flexibility with how you study. And it can look overwhelming at first, but I'll kind of run through and focus or help you focus on where to start. Always at the top, which is specific categories. We're going to jump in there in just a minute. But you can also see you can do random questions. So as you progress through your training, maybe you have 10 minutes, 15 minutes, you just want to take 10 or 15 questions. You can do that through the random question mode. As you build up progress and test history, you can use the Smart Study feature. The system will analyze your past results based on category performance and question performance and build a custom study session based on your weakest areas. So it's a good way to focus, again, as you get those data points built up after taking practice tests and study sessions to really focus on just those weaker areas. There's a marked questions feature, so you can take a new session just based on questions you marked, which is a key reminder that as you go through and study and you see questions that you're confused or maybe don't fully understand, as I'll show you, use that mark function, which will allow you to come back to those questions at a later time. Three advanced functions here that are really unique to how you want to approach the test prep, but questions I've never answered correctly, questions I've missed at least once, or questions I've never seen. These three are probably, as you wrap up your test preparation process, that you maybe want to hit those at the very end just to make sure there's a couple sections or questions that you may have overlooked or missed, or maybe Sporty's has added new questions to the course if you're taking several months to get through this. Check that out and use those features just to make sure that you have been exposed to all the questions. And then lastly, a question search. If you have a key topic or subject area, you can build a study session just based on keywords. But for now, we're focusing on the beginning, so we're going to look at specific categories. As the system loads, you're going to see a list of categories here. And at the top, you can select either question mode or flashcard mode. Again, as starting out, select the first option, which is question mode. That's going to show three multiple choice answers with the question. As you progress and feel more comfortable, you can jump over to flashcard mode. Exactly what it sounds like. You're going to see a flashcard with just a question. You're not going to see any answers, and you have to kind of mentally think about that and formulate the answer in your mind to then flip the flashcard over to answer the question. So a lot of students like that. Depending on where they're at in their training, you have the option to go either way. We've got 7 main categories here. These are grouped by the Airman Certification Standards areas of operation. So if you've been in the ACS, these should look familiar to you, as the knowledge test is organized and outlined and guided by the Airman Certification Standards. So same categories there. Each one has subcategories, so you can expand that down, as you can see in the menu here. And on the right-hand side, there is performance. So I can see how I've done in recent sessions. So most recent session, a culmination or combination of the last 3 sessions, and then all sessions. So for example, if I jump down into the instrument approach category, I can see there are 5 categories or 5 subcategories. And it looks like my weakest performing category here is precision approach. So we're going to jump into that category to study based on my past history. Now, if you're starting from scratch, what I'd recommend is just picking one subcategory at a time. You may want to start out with what you're currently working on in your instrument training, or just go down top to bottom. There's really not a right or wrong answer there, whatever you feel comfortable with. But the overall approach should be to at least study a session from every category or subcategory at least once, so that you're exposed to every question and are prepared for what you might see on the actual test. It's going to take some time, but it's really the sure-proof way to make sure, again, you've seen every possible question and are ready for anything that the FAA test may throw at you at the actual facility. So I've selected precision approach, so we're going to expect to see a session here with 70 questions. On the left-hand side is your organized list of questions. You can jump around however you'd like, but might as well just go through them in order. You'll have questions here. Some refer to figures, and actually a lot of them refer to figures in this case because we're looking at approach charts. So you can click on a button, review the figure. We'll show a preview. You can also open it in a new tab. You can make that much larger. You could have it on your iPad handy as well. You could download the entire supplements book, which is download all figures here. You can download that entire PDF of all figures and have that handy as well. Whatever is most convenient for you. Some students even like to print them all out and just have them in a print form next to the computer. In that case, that really simulates more of what you'd actually experience on the knowledge test, since you'd be given a book there at the facility. So we'll read the question. I'm just going to pick a random answer for now. And I picked the correct answer. You can see here the green box and a correct answer note. Every single answer, correct or incorrect, has a written explanation, and these are handwritten by the instructors at Sporty's. So these are designed to help you understand why the correct answer is correct, or if you selected the incorrect answer, why that's not correct. So I highly recommend you turn this part into a study session. Don't just fly through these and pick them as fast as you can and move on, but read the answer, read the explanation. And sometimes this stuff is complicated. It's complex, and there may be a need to study further. And that's why we have links here to additional resources that correspond. In this case, the Instrument Procedures Handbook. And so if I click on the reference link, it's going to take me right to that PDF here to do additional study. Obviously, you're not going to need to do that on every question, but I highly recommend if you're at a point where something just doesn't make sense or you want to learn more, use the additional resource to study. I mentioned the marking ability. That's a function right here with the mark button. You'll see when you do that, the little windsock fills in. That question is now marked in your course's database, meaning that you can go back at any time via the marked question function and rejoin and look at that question again, which I find helpful. You're going to find a handful of questions at some point, even after maybe you read the explanation or read the handbook or the associated reference material. It just doesn't make sense or it doesn't add up. And that's where marking the question and referencing it with your instructor can help. And also included with your course is the Ask a CFI function. So in the bottom right here, you have a help center, and there's this nice Ask a CFI feature with an email. You can send a flight instructor here at Sporty's your question, and they will get back to you with an answer. So we have that resource as well from a standpoint of online support to help you beyond just technical support, but also to help you with the question. What I'll also point out is you have the notes feature. And again, if I maybe went through that too quickly, there's a little widget here at the bottom right, this little gauge essentially that pulls up this help menu. And on the bottom here is the My Notes feature, and which this is basically your little notepad to jot down questions or other ideas you have for studying. But when you generate a new note from test prep, it's automatically going to include the question in the note with a link back to that question. So this is kind of like mark question on steroids, where now you've made a new note in your notepad, type out, hey, I don't understand this, or what does it mean when it says this crossing restriction? I don't fully understand that. Might be a reason for you to go back and research it later and study, or send it to your instructor. But a really nice feature here that happens automatically from any question. As soon as you hit start a new note, it's going to tag the question that you're currently viewing in that note for later reference. So a really powerful feature there to take advantage of. So the main objective here in the study session would be to go through all 70 questions, continue answering. Another thing I'll point out, highly advise, if you answer a question incorrectly the first time, like I did here, of course I could correct it and make that right. That's not the right answer, the right approach. Leave your question graded or answered just as you did the first time. Because what you want to start to do is build up some study history. And that question being marked incorrect, as you grade it, you're going to get a feel for the score. But it's also going to tell you in your analytics when you grade it that, hey, that was a question I missed the first time. And it's going to count towards your weaker areas. So as, again, the smart study features or questions I've answered incorrectly can be used to go back and revisit that question. Hopefully you learn from it, you see it again, you answer it correctly. So don't feel the need to always just grade these to 100%. Leave your selections incorrect if that's how you answered it, and move on. It's really going to help you out with your data and help you refine your study process as you move through this further. Now you can save and quit, so if for whatever reason you have to step away, we will save your progress. You can resume later, and you can do that as many times as you'd like. Some students have fairly large study sessions with hundreds of questions for whatever reason, and they want to do a little bit at a time and come back to it later. You have the full flexibility to do that. But when finished, we'll hit the grade session button here. Of course, we have a warning that we have not finished all the questions, but that's okay. We'll go ahead and grade it. 3% score, something you'll probably never see actually using this, but that's the scenario here for our demonstration. So what I want to show now is our study history, and again, some of these data points that can be used for various reasons and additional study purposes. So let's look at this. Here's the study history that shows up at the bottom of the Start New Session and FAA Practice Test. Here's a session here where I had selected every question. Again, not really realistic, but I just did this for an example to show some of the data points. You'll have a brief summary of how your performance measured up against the main categories, your color-coded scales. And then you have the option to create new sessions based on 4 different scenarios on this session. So I could study all the questions I answered correctly. I could just focus on the questions answered incorrectly, marked questions, or retry the entire session. So a great way to go back, and I'd say the most useful feature here in my opinion. So let's look at this session here. We did 95% on this study session. I missed 56 questions here on the study session. It's probably valuable if I haven't done it yet to go back and just focus on those 56 questions answered incorrectly. Again, to continue to reinforce the material that you maybe didn't answer the first time on your own, to go back and grade that at that point to 100%. Hopefully, you've learned from those mistakes the first time, understand the material better, and when you see that question again, you'll be in good shape. So that's what the preparation process looks like. Just a lot of study sessions, a lot of reading, a lot of understanding, following up on key material. And over time, you're going to, again, get to that point where you feel comfortable with the entire test prep database. And that's when it's time to start taking practice tests. Hopefully, if the study preparation and you do it according to plan, you get in here, you're going to be getting really good scores right away on your practice test. Again, the FAA standard minimum is 70% to pass. We consider 80% a bare minimum. So to get your endorsement from this course, we require you to get at least two 80% practice test scores in addition to completing all the video training. Me personally, I would strive for 90%. So 80% is the minimum on the software. I would focus on getting 90% or greater, getting two or three scores, and then you're set to take the test, and you'll be in really good shape then. So when you're in practice test mode, you're going to select an answer. You're not going to get feedback. You're not going to tell you right or wrong or any explanations. But just like the real test, you're picking your answers and going through all 60 questions. When you're finished, you'll hit grade. Likely see that nice score of 90% or higher, and that will register in your history. Now, of course, this was a sample session, so 2%, not very common, but that was the outcome there. If you look at the left-hand side over here, in the progress section, you'll see all your video progress from 0 to 100%. It'll also save your top two test prep scores that are over the 80% course threshold. So in this case, I have 195% test score. My objective here would be to take another practice test to get a score over ideally 90%, but the course is looking for an 80% to pass the course. When that happens, when you have 100% video progress and two scores of 80% or higher, this knowledge test endorsement section will unlock, and you'll see a button to request your endorsement. That's where you get your actual knowledge test endorsement from Sporty's to take the test at the testing center. That happens automatically. There's no human interaction involved on our side. So as soon as you've met those requirements, could be Saturday night at 3 a.m. when the rest of us are sleeping, that button will activate, press it, fill out the form, and you'll be emailed an endorsement within minutes to go ahead and take the official knowledge test. So again, you can see here, this whole process is really designed to be a self-study system for you, the student, to go through, learn the material for ground school, be prepared for flight training, and also prepared for the knowledge test, and ultimately ending with the ability to generate that knowledge test endorsement from the course. All right, with that, I'm going to jump back over to our presentation and give a couple of tips here to wrap up. So again, that's what that endorsement will look like after you complete the course. It'll be a PDF with our chief instructor's signature, official endorsement verbiage that the testing center is looking for you to go ahead and take the test, and just a very simple and automated process. So I'm going to wrap up with a couple of strategy tips that I like to give on to students, and this goes for instrument rating or really any test, honestly. But always answer the easy questions first. So if the very first question you get when you open up your test at the testing facility is a complicated cross-country planning question with a lot of performance charts, or it's asking you to figure out a DME distance to a VOR to calculate a holding pattern and 4 or 5 steps, go ahead and skip it. Don't exert a lot of mental effort on that very first question. Do the basic ones that you know and can answer quickly based on your memory and skill, because there will be just as many of those that might ask about a regulation or a specific procedure from the AIM or an approach minimum at the bottom of an ILS chart. But answer those easy questions first. Mark the ones you don't want to answer and come back to those at the very end, just so you don't waste a lot of mental effort early on. I always like to look at the question and read it twice. I don't even look at the answer, just strictly focus on the question and think about what your answer might be before you even look at it. Because a lot of times if you can formulate that answer in your mind without being forced to look at the answers and pick from one of those, it's going to help reinforce you have the correct answer when you actually see them. And then you can look at it and say, okay, yep, that's what I had in mind. That's definitely the answer. So it's going to help you from being, persuaded by possibly an incorrect answer. What the FAA likes to do. They don't always like to make this cut and dry. There can be a couple answers that look very close to the correct one. Another part here is to use the en route charts. You're going to have scenarios where you have to look at instruments like an HSI or a CDI needle, but draw your location on the actual chart. So in this case here, we're trying to figure out a location between two VORs, and they'll give you some paper overlays where you can lay down on top of the chart because you can't write in the actual book. It's reused by every student. But go ahead and draw out where you think you might be. And again, that's not something you're going to actually do while you're flying in a real airplane, but this isn't really stuff you actually really do in an airplane. So it kind of goes hand in hand. So in this case, take your time, draw it out, help visualize what you're looking for. And again, that's where that plotter can help draw those straight lines on the paper overlay on top of the book based on what you're seeing, in this case, on the navigation instruments. Another part is, as I mentioned, don't look at the answer until you come up with your own. So here's an example where we're looking for a number on an ILS approach chart, and you're going to look at the figure. You have everything you need to figure out the answer. There's only one answer. It's a very black and white, cut and dry, objective number you're looking for. So go ahead and again, cross out the answers. Don't look at them. Go right to the chart, read the question, figure out what that answer is. There it is, 1008. And then boom, look at the answer. There it is, 1008 MSL is the correct answer. So it gives you the confidence when you do it that way to know that you have the right answer in mind, and then picking it from the list just validates that as an option at that point. You're going to have holding questions, and holding in the modern world today, especially with advanced avionics like those from Garmin, the system's going to tell you the preferred holding method when you're actually flying holding patterns in the airplane, which on top of that is very rare. I can only tell you a couple times in 23 years of instrument flying, they've actually had a holding pattern issued to me. But you'll do them a lot in training, and you'll be tested on them on the knowledge test. And they're very specific about the holding entry directions. They have the various sectors of 70 degrees, 110 degrees, and 180 degrees for parallel, direct, and teardrop entries. So go ahead and draw those out and get your answer correct to within a degree. That's what the FAA is looking for on the actual questions and answers. Even though you might not do that on the actual when you're actually flying, this is what you need to do on the test. And use the exact recommended entry procedure that the FAA recommends. And again, in this case, this is where drawing it out can help, and write the numbers down, visualize it, take your time, and get the correct answer. In this case here, as an example, and you can see from the instrument flying handbook, there's three sectors there: teardrop, parallel, and direct. It's very important that you find the one that matches up exactly with what the FAA is looking for, even though you might not want to do that actually in the airplane. Okay, we're going to wrap up with the nuts and bolts of scheduling the test. So you likely already have an FAA tracking number, an FTN number from when you did your private training, which was registered and created from the FAA IACRA website. Next step is to locate a testing facility. Hopefully, maybe recently you took your private not too long ago. As you move on to your instrument rating, you hopefully can go back to that same testing facility, which is proctored by PSI, the FAA's third-party testing provider. You'll have to create an account and register for a test at the PSI website. And again, what to bring, you're going to need your test endorsement. That could come from a flight instructor, but again, most days today, students prefer to use a online ground school, online course like Sporty's instrument rating course. Must be a U.S. citizen, government issued ID card or password for U.S. citizens, and bring your E6B flight computer and plotter. Again, we're looking at Sporty's instrument rating course, my recommended tool for preparation, tried and true. A lot of students and thousands of students have used this over the years with much success. Again, not only to pass the knowledge test, but just to make a better instrument rated pilot, make you comfortable flying in the system after your check ride. Again, more information, sportys.com/courses. And Eric, if you're around still, happy to answer any questions that may have popped up along the way.
Brett, thank you very much. So let's start. We have a number of our attendees today are taking advantage of the ability for the Sporty's course users to access the training content in a variety of platforms online, iOS app, Android app, Roku TV, whatever the case may be. So we have a specific question related to whether users have the access to the note-taking feature in multiple versions. So I guess a broader question for you, could you just talk briefly about what features are only available in the online version of the courseware as opposed to some of the apps?
Yeah, great question. So across all platforms, that would be online, iOS and Android, are all the full test preparation tools. So all the study modes, all the practice tests, the analytics, and that all syncs. So anytime you take a test or study session on one platform, provided you're signed in with your same user account, that progress will sync over to the other device, which means all your analytics, all your weak areas, your strong areas, all that carries through, no matter which system you practice on. What is unique to the online course right now are those smart notes. So your notes will only be available in the online course. Great point there. Outside of test prep, I mentioned aviation intelligence, our chat DBE. We also have chat FAR, Federal Aviation Regulation preparation. That currently is only available online. Otherwise, every other feature is available across all platforms.
Great, thank you for that, Brett. A number of questions, and you did address it a little bit later in the presentation, but it's probably worth emphasizing again. So, could you give us some specifics? There's a lot of users curious, like, what are your thoughts on, what our users should be looking for to know, hey, I'm ready to take this? I know you mentioned a 90% score. Do you want to talk about, like, consistency in scoring? When should our users feel really good, like, okay, I have this endorsement, I'm scoring this consistently, I'm ready to go take the test?
Yep. So number one, as I mentioned, make sure you go through every question through the study modes first, and that's going through methodically through all. I think right now we're up to 1,154 questions. So no matter what, always start there. Take every question, answer them, build some study history up, reinforce the weak areas by using Smart Study. And at that point, once you feel comfortable with that entire set of data, then start taking practice tests. I think the comfortability point, really the baseline, I recommend to my students who really want to do well and feel comfortable. When you're starting to get all 90% scores, and I'd say three or more would be my personal recommendation. Three scores in a row over 90%, you're ready. Now, again, our baseline is 80%. You'll still pass that way, but students want to get that higher score, and again, shows why the pass rate and scores here are so high on the instrument rating test compared to others, is because students do prepare. And I hate to use the term over prepare, but thoroughly prepare for this test because they want to get it right the first time. So I'd say comfortably 390% scores in a row, you're ready to go.
Excellent, excellent. How about for those who take the written test and then get your written test report, and it may have some of those learning codes related to deficient areas? What's the best way users can go about remedial training or getting some extra help on those topics?
Yeah, good question. So first off, I'll tell you we're working on an exciting new feature we'll debut here next month, which will allow you to scan. This is kind of some inside information here, but you'll be able to scan your knowledge test results into your course, and we will automatically tell you what the codes are and prepare a study session for you. That's coming soon, so if your check ride is more than a month away, keep an eye out for that feature in our course. It'll be included for all existing users, and a great way to simplify that process. But what you'll get on the test report, the standard test report, you'll see ACS codes, Airman Certification Standards, knowledge codes, could be a risk management code. There's a couple of those also. Those correspond to subjects or subtopics related to questions you answered incorrectly on the test. And your goal here is to go ahead and reference the Airman Certification Standards. It's in your online course. Find those codes, find those topics, and brush up on those particular subjects. You're not going to see the exact question that you missed, but what's going to happen during your check ride, specifically on the oral exam portion, the examiner is going to look at those and make those kind of special emphasis areas and ask you questions about the subjects you missed on the test. So for now, it's a manual process. Grab the ACS, look up the codes, but stay tuned for, yeah, this is a new feature coming out here shortly that will automatically allow you to scan your test results, show you the codes, and present a study guide and study tool to help you brush up on those areas.
Excellent, thank you. And for the entire audience, I did just drop in the chat window a link to what should be a very helpful article that was published on flighttrainingcentral.com, and that's an article dedicated to how you can interpret those written test reports. And also, Brett, I'd also dropped that link for the demo that you mentioned earlier, which was sportys.com/demo.
Good, thanks.
Brett, a few questions related to the oh gosh, for lack of a better term, the trick questions or so. And I thought this might be a good opportunity for you to talk about the ongoing installment we have at Flight Training Central, where we identify those frequently missed test questions that stump people.
Yeah, great point. And again, this is where I say there's a disconnect between being a safe and proficient instrument pilot versus being a test taker. And it's painful to say, but those are two different things at this point. So we have to play the game and satisfy FAA's requirement to answer these questions, even though they may have zero bearing on what you actually do on the airplane or do well in flying an actual trip. So FAA does a couple of things. They publish ACS codes that are missed frequently by pilots on these tests. We keep an eye on that. We also track questions in our system most frequently missed. There's no privacy issues here. We're not tying it to a user, but we track questions that across the board are missed frequently that we see students struggling with. And not necessarily because Sporty's wrote these questions to be challenging, but they, again, are representative of what's actually on the test. And so what we do in Flight Training Central is periodically we'll post articles completely free for students to check out with the actual questions that we're seeing commonly missed, and you can study those from that article or that blog in interactive form on Flight Training Central. Same article or same website, I'm sure that Eric posted here with that information on the ACS codes. But keep an eye on that, and you'll find the questions that are most frequently missed, and oftentimes not intentionally written that way, but just again things that a lot of students tend to miss or overlook due to something unique about a chart or the wording. So a great way to keep up with trends and what other students are experiencing along with you in terms of those challenges.
I did post that link as well, and you can sign up there free and get an email from us every couple of weeks, and we always publish when we have another round of those frequently missed questions. Brett, we have a very kind of kind-hearted group with us today, and this is a great question to end the presentation on. But we have some users that are interested in giving feedback. Now, I'm not sure this question could relate to feedback directly to the FAA, or it could be feedback for you. So if users see topics or see questions that they think would be helpful for other pilots, like how can they communicate that to you and your team?
Yeah, definitely. And throughout the industry, that's we all work together on this. We're all trying to help students prepare for the test. And again, FAA doesn't publish these questions, so we rely on the feedback from our students here at our flight school and students taking the test. Best advice there, write this email address down, the CFI at Sporties. We'd love to communicate with you. Obviously, that's our for paid users or course users who are enrolled in the actual course itself to be able to ask questions related to their course, but also a great way to pass along feedback and what you're actually experiencing out there in the real world, both on the test and in your training, that can help us make the course better for other users.
Excellent. And then I'll mention too that the FAA Airman Testing Division, you can search for their site. They do also have a method or have a link where users, people just like you, if you think you have a really good question, you can actually submit a question directly to FAA. And I think they ask for an official source, et cetera. And who knows, your question might show up on the written test one day. With that, Brett, unless you had anything else, we will go ahead and wrap up.
Yeah, that's it. Right on time. Love talking about this stuff and appreciate everybody's interest in our program and hope we can help you out on your pilot career and onto your next check ride, rating or certificate.
Excellent. And just the final reminder, this recorded presentation and all of our webinar presentations will be available in the Sporty's YouTube channel. So come back anytime and review as much as you'd like. And we certainly appreciate you spending some time with us today. For our presenter, Brett Kobe, again, I'm Eric Radke. And on behalf of Sporty's, thank you very much for joining us and safe flying.